Lieutenant James Winters had no idea what he was walking into when he was assigned to serve under Commander Yara of the Cernix Empire. Fresh out of the Human Exploration Fleet Academy, he was eager to prove himself in his first official mission with the alien allies. The orders had been clear: assist the Cernox in their ongoing campaign, share intelligence, and learn from their tactical genius. What James had not anticipated was the sheer terror that would follow once he set foot on her ship. The moment he boarded the Cernox flagship, an imposing vessel known as the Virosh, he felt a chill run down his spine. The ship was massive, far larger than any human vessel he had ever seen. Its metallic exterior gleamed in the dim light of the docking bay, and as the hatch opened, he was greeted by an eerie silence. The Cernox crew moved about with purpose, their movements fluid and coordinated, like soldiers born from the very fabric of the ship. James stepped off the transport shuttle, his boots making a soft thud on the cold metal floor. His eyes darted around as he tried to take in the enormity of the ship. Alien technology was everywhere. Strange glowing symbols on the walls, control panels that looked nothing like the human designs, and the hum of the engines in the background, as if the ship itself was alive. A tall Cernox officer approached him, his glowing eyes scanning James. "You're assigned to Commander Yalara. Follow me," the officer said in a voice that had no warmth, only a command. James nodded and followed the officer down a narrow corridor, the walls narrowing as they moved deeper into the ship. He tried to maintain his composure, but a sense of unease settled in his chest. The further they went, the quieter it became, as if the ship were swallowing them whole. Finally, they stopped at a heavy metal door, adorned with intricate alien designs. The officer pressed a button and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, Commander Yalara stood, overlooking a holographic map of the galaxy. James took a moment to observe her. Yalar was a towering figure, even by Cernox standards. Her skin, a dark shade of violet, was covered in faint ridges, and her eyes were an intense, glowing orange. The sheer presence she exuded was magnetic. Her black armor, marked with gold filigree, seemed to amplify her stature. She didn't turn immediately, but waited for James to step into the room. The door closed behind him with a low thud. "Lieutenant Winters," her voice came, cold and unwavering. "You are to be my assistant during this mission. You will follow my orders and observe. I expect results, not questions." James swallowed, his throat dry. "Understood, Commander," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Yalar's eyes flicked to the holographic map.
"You'll be assisting with strategy and logistics. The Cernox Empire does not tolerate mistakes, Lieutenant."
"If you make one, it will be your last." Her tone sent a chill through his spine, but James tried to keep his posture firm.
"I'm ready to contribute." Yara turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. "Ready, you say?" She stepped closer, and James instinctively took a step back, his heart racing.
"Then prove it!" The tension in the air thickened as Yarla studied him with an intensity that made James feel like an insect under a microscope. He was barely able to keep eye contact, feeling small under her gaze. "Follow me. I'll show you the bridge," she said after a moment, her voice returning to its commanding no-nonsense tone. James nodded and followed her through the ship's winding hallways. The ship seemed endless, and he couldn't help but notice the crew's behavior. The Cernox soldiers never spoke unless spoken to, and they carried themselves with a disciplined air that left no room for mistakes. There was no camaraderie, no light-hearted chatter. It was all business. When they reached the bridge, James was struck by the stark difference in atmosphere. The entire room was illuminated by a soft blue glow, but the intensity of the lights reflected off the sleek alien consoles, making the space feel both futuristic and intimidating. The officers who worked here were all focused, eyes trained on their screens. The air felt thick with a quiet urgency, and James felt out of place, like he didn't belong. Yalar moved to a command chair and sat down, her hands resting lightly on the controls. "You'll learn quickly, Lieutenant, or you won't last long." The Cernox Empire does not suffer weaknesses. We are a force of nature. James tried to keep his nerves in check. I'll learn, Commander. Yalara's gaze flicked over to him, studying him once more. You may be human, Lieutenant, but you are here now. You belong to the Sirnox Empire for as long as you serve.
Don't forget that. With a nod, James stepped forward to the tactical console.
The reality of the situation was sinking in. This wasn't just about working with an alien empire. It was about survival. It was about proving his worth to a species that valued power and efficiency above all else. As he worked alongside Yara and her officers, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was being tested at every moment. His every action was scrutinized. There was no room for error, no room for hesitation. Every command Yara issued was delivered with chilling precision, and every action was carried out without question. The more James observed, the more he realized that Yara was not just a military leader. She was a force of nature, the way she commanded, the way her crew followed her, the way enemies trembled at the mere mention of her name. It was all built on fear and respect. James had thought of her as an ally, someone he could learn from, but now he was beginning to understand the true nature of her power. As the days passed, James found himself caught between admiration and fear. Yara was everything he had hoped to learn from in a commander, intelligent, tactical, and fiercely capable. But she was also terrifying in ways he had never imagined. He saw her on the battlefield during a simulated attack, where she gave commands with such cold efficiency that it felt like watching a machine at work. Her ability to anticipate her enemies' moves and counter them before they even had a chance to act was nothing short of extraordinary. One evening, after a long day of simulations, James stood on the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, but all he could think about was Yaller and the looming presence she had in his mind. She had been a mystery to him at first, but now he was beginning to understand her. She wasn't just a leader, she was an embodiment of the very concept of fear in battle. He didn't know what was more terrifying, the fact that she could command such an overwhelming presence, or the fact that he was beginning to feel a sense of awe and respect for her. James had always been someone who prided himself on his ability to think on his feet, to make decisions with confidence. But Yara's decision-making was on a level he couldn't even fathom. It was as if she saw the universe in a way no one else could, calculating every possible outcome with frightening precision. As he stood there, contemplating the vastness of space, a voice suddenly cut through his thoughts.
Lieutenant. James turned, finding Yalar standing behind him, her expression unreadable. Do you still think you're ready? She asked, her voice sharp.
James hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. But as he looked into her eyes, he knew one thing for certain. He had no idea what he was truly up against. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady. Yaller stared at him for a long moment before nodding, her eyes never leaving his. We shall see, Lieutenant. James had been on the Virash for a week now, and the sense of unease that lingered at the edges of his thoughts only grew with each passing day. Commander Yalara was everything he had expected, and more. Her presence, whether she was in the room or not, seemed to stretch beyond her physical form, like a shadow that fell over everyone and everything. The more he worked alongside her, the more James realized just how little he truly understood about the alien commander. During their first few missions together, James saw glimpses of the sheer scale of her power. She was a master tactician, always several steps ahead of her enemies, anticipating their moves with eerie precision. Yet what unsettled James the most was the cold efficiency with which she handled her crew. There was no room for error. Nyalar did not tolerate mistakes. No one did on her ship. The crew, despite their disciplined nature, seemed terrified of her. They would move with quick, purposeful steps whenever she was nearby, their eyes avoiding hers, as if to acknowledge her was to court disaster. In the quiet corridors of the ship, James often overheard whispers among the Cernox officers, referring to Yarlar with a mixture of reverence and fear. They spoke of her past, of the countless battles she had fought and won, and of her rise to power, each victory earned through blood and sacrifice. It wasn't long before James found himself under her direct command during a tactical simulation exercise. The Sirnox Empire placed great importance on these drills, testing their officers' abilities to think on their feet and adapt quickly. Yalara, however, didn't treat these simulations as mere exercises. To her, they were real. She pushed the crew to their limits, always demanding more, expecting flawless performance. James found himself struggling to keep up. He was new, inexperienced, and felt out of place. As the simulation began, the tension in the air was palpable. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he focused on the screens, trying to follow the commands. Yara's voice echoed through the comm system, sharp and commanding. "Target their weak points!
Don't waste time. The longer we wait, the more lives will be lost."
Her words were cold, but they were precise, cutting through the fog of confusion in James's mind. There was no room for hesitation, no space for second-guessing. Every decision had to be swift, decisive. "Lieutenant Winters!" Yara's voice snapped through his earpiece, her tone stern. "Do you have an answer for me, or do I need to remind you of what happens to those who fail?" The sharpness in her voice cut through the haze of fear that had been building inside him. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Failure wasn't an option. James quickly scanned the data before him, his mind racing. He had to make a decision, and quickly. "Engage the enemy from the flanks, Commander," James said, his voice betraying only the slightest tremor. "We'll catch them off guard." Yara didn't respond immediately. For a moment, James thought he had made a mistake. But then, without a word, she gave the order. The V-Rosh shifted in space, its engines roaring as it moved into position. James held his breath as the enemy ships approached, the simulation now a high-stakes reality. The battle played out in front of him, a whirlwind of flashing lights and exploding ships. James's heart pounded in his chest as the simulation grew more intense. He could feel the pressure mounting. It was as if every movement was being watched, every decision being judged. He had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Yet, Yara was there, guiding them, her calm presence cutting through the chaos. As the simulation concluded, the enemy forces were defeated, their ships scattered in all directions. James exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. But when he turned to look at Yarlar, her expression remained unreadable. "Well done, Lieutenant," she said, her voice cold but with a hint of approval. "But don't think for a moment that this is the standard. You are capable of more, and I expect more." Her praise, though faint, sent a shiver down James's spine. It wasn't enough to comfort him. It was a reminder of how much more he needed to prove himself. There was no room for complacency under Yalar's command. The following days became a blur of intense training and tactical exercises. James felt as if he were constantly being pushed, his limits tested at every turn. The crew was no different. They were all under the same relentless pressure. Yet James couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard he tried, he was always one step behind, constantly catching up to the expectations placed on him. During one of the late-night shifts, James found himself alone in the ship's mess hall, a rare moment of peace in an otherwise chaotic schedule. He sat at a table, staring at his meal, lost in thought. The sounds of the ship's engines hummed in the background, a constant reminder of the vast, unfeeling universe they were navigating. As he took a bite of his food, the door to the mess hall slid open. James looked up, startled to find Yarla standing there, her tall form casting a long shadow across the room. Her piercing gaze swept over him as she walked towards the counter. "You've been quiet, Lieutenant," she remarked, her voice devoid of emotion.
"Something on your mind?" James hesitated for a moment before responding.
"I'm just trying to keep up, Commander." She raised an eyebrow, her eyes narrowing slightly, as she studied him. "You think you're struggling, Winters?"
Perhaps you are.
James swallowed hard. "I feel like I'm not good enough. Like I'm always behind." Yalara's expression softened ever so slightly, but it was enough to make James pause. For a moment, he thought he saw something resembling understanding in her eyes, but it was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it had come.
"You are not here to be good enough, Lieutenant," she said. "You are here to be better than everyone else."
The Cernox Empire is not a place for mediocrity. There is no room for failure. James nodded, but the weight of her words hung heavily in the air. He didn't know if he could meet her expectations. Yet, something inside him stirred. The more he worked with Yara, the more he wanted to prove himself, to show that he was capable of more than just being a tool in her war machine. The next mission was a test of both his skills and his resolve. The Cernox Empire was preparing for an operation to secure a strategic planet on the edge of enemy territory. It was a mission that could tip the scales of the ongoing war in the Empire's favor. There was no room for error, and James was to be a key player in the operation. He sat at the command console, watching the planets on the display. Lara stood behind him, her presence looming like a storm cloud. She didn't need to speak. James knew what was expected. The mission would succeed, or they would pay the price. As the operation began, James's nerves were on edge. He could hear Yara's voice in his ear, her calm instructions guiding him through each step. She was relentless in her precision, and the tension in the air was palpable. They encountered enemy forces as they approached the planet's atmosphere. The battle that followed was intense, the ships locked in a deadly dance. James's heart raced as he monitored the data, trying to stay ahead of the unfolding chaos. Each move he made was scrutinized by Lara. Each decision weighed with the gravity of the situation. It was during this operation that James realized something crucial. Yara wasn't just terrifying because of her power. She was terrifying because she was a force of nature, an unstoppable entity in a galaxy filled with chaos and danger. Her calm demeanor, her ability to remain unshaken in the face of certain death, it was all part of what made her so terrifying. She could see the universe in a way that no one else could. And in that moment, as James watched the enemy forces retreat and the mission successfully concluded, he understood. Yalar wasn't just a commander. She was a reminder of the raw, unrelenting power that shaped the universe, a power that could crush anyone who wasn't strong enough to keep up. He wasn't just serving under her, he was surviving her. And, in time, he realized he would either grow to become like her, or he would be crushed by the weight of it all.